So, they're briefing people about you now. Yeah, you. The one they pull aside in hushed tones. The one they warn the new hires about before orientation's even finished. The one whose name appears in conversations with a specific kind of weight. Don't engage with them, just don't. And you felt it, didn't you? The shift. The way rooms got quieter when you entered. And the way eye contact became impossible for people who used to look right through you. The way your notifications changed. Your circle shrank. Your presence alone became a disruption they couldn't manage anymore. They labeled you. Not officially, not on paper, but in whispers between managers, in warnings between co-workers, in messages marked sensitive and filed under handle with care. Psychologically dangerous. Those were the words they used. Not violent, not unstable, not unpredictable in the way that gets you fired or escorted out. No, you're dangerous in a way they can't quite articulate, can't quite document, can't quite defend against. You're dangerous because you think differently, because you question the unquestionable, because you refuse to pretend the emperor is clothed when he's standing there naked and shivering. You became the person they couldn't control, couldn't predict, couldn't manipulate into compliance. And that made you a threat to the entire fragile ecosystem they'd built on lies and performance and silent agreement to never, ever tell the truth. Let me tell you how it started. It wasn't dramatic, was it? No big explosion, no public meltdown, no scene that justified their fear. It was subtler than that. It was the moment you stopped laughing at jokes that weren't funny. It was when you refused to participate in the casual cruelty they called office culture. It was when you looked someone dead in the eye and said, "No, that's not accurate," when everyone else was nodding along to the lie. Small moments. Tiny fractures in their false reality. But those fractures, they spread. Because every time you refused to play along, you reminded everyone else in the room that they were playing. Every time you spoke truth, you made their comfortable lies unbearable. Every time you stood firm, you showed them how much they'd been bending. And they couldn't have that. They couldn't have someone walking around being authentic while they were all performing, so they did what cowards always do when confronted with someone they can't break. They labeled you. They turned your honesty into confrontational. They turned your boundaries into difficult. They turned your standards into unrealistic. They pathologized your refusal to participate in their dysfunction. And then they started the campaign. The quiet one, the one that happens in private messages and closed-door conversations and carefully worded emails that never quite say what they mean, but everyone understands perfectly. Be careful around them. That's how it started. Just a friendly warning from someone who cares. Just a casual mention that you're intense or hard to read or not really a team player. Nothing concrete, nothing you could challenge, nothing that would hold up if examined. Just seeds, just implications, just the slow poison of suggestion dripping into every interaction you'd ever have from that moment forward. And it worked, didn't it? You watched it happen in real time. Watched people who used to chat with you suddenly remember urgent tasks when you approached. Watched invitations stop coming. Watched your input in meetings get acknowledged with tight smiles and immediate topic changes. Watched yourself become invisible while somehow being the most visible person in the building. They were briefing people about you. New employees got the warning before they even learned where the bathrooms were. That person over there, keep your distance. Trust me on this. No explanation, no context, no evidence. Just the label, passed down like a curse, ensuring you'd be isolated before you'd even had a chance to introduce yourself. And the cruelest part? You couldn't defend yourself. How do you fight a whisper? How do you prove a negative? How do you challenge an accusation that was never formally made? You can't. That's the beauty of their strategy. They've made you guilty of something that was never named, judged you by standards that were never articulated, convicted you in a trial that never took place. But here's what they didn't count on. Here's what they never saw coming in their careful little campaign to neutralize you. You stopped caring. Not because you gave up, not because you broke, but because you finally understood the game completely. You saw through the matrix of their manufactured reality and realized something profound. Their opinion of you was never based on who you actually were. It was based on who they needed you to be to justify their own choices. They needed you to be dangerous so they could feel safe in their cowardice. They needed you to be difficult so they could feel easy in their compliance. They needed you to be wrong so they could feel right about lying. The label wasn't about you. It was never about you. It was about them. About their desperate need to maintain a reality where questioning is threatening, where authenticity is aggressive, where truth is violence. So you stopped performing. Stopped trying to prove you weren't what they said. Stopped defending yourself against accusations that were designed to be indefensible. You just existed, unapologetically, unfiltered, undiluted, and that drove them absolutely insane. Because their entire strategy depended on you caring what they thought. It required your participation in your own isolation. It needed you to shrink, to soften, to sanitize yourself into something more palatable. But you didn't. You expanded. You got sharper. You became more precisely yourself than ever before. Now let's talk about what happened next. Because this is where the story gets interesting. Mr. Sue put out... He's a hero. This is where their plans started backfiring in ways they never anticipated. See, when you stopped trying to disprove the label, something shifted. People started getting curious. What makes them so dangerous became the question everyone was asking. And when they looked, when they actually observed you instead of just accepting the narrative, they didn't find a monster. They found someone who said what everyone else was thinking. Someone who refused to participate in obvious nonsense. Someone who had standards and boundaries and expectations of basic human decency. Someone who was, frankly, shockingly sane in an environment that had normalized complete insanity. And that created a problem for your accusers. Because once people started looking at you with their own eyes instead of through the filter of fear they'd been given, the narrative started crumbling. They started crumbling. Suddenly you weren't dangerous, you were just honest. You weren't difficult, you were just consistent. You weren't threatening, you were just uncompromising. And the people who'd labeled you, they started looking like something else entirely. They started looking scared. They started looking controlling. They started looking like exactly the kind of people who would need to silence someone telling the truth. The whispers changed. Not everywhere, not with everyone, but enough to notice. Why exactly are we supposed to avoid them? Became a question people asked out loud. And the answers, when they came, were revealing. They just make people uncomfortable. They don't fit the culture. They ask too many questions. Nothing substantial, nothing real, just admissions that you were guilty of not going along with the program. So now you walk through spaces differently, not with the desperate energy of someone trying to prove their innocence, not with the hunched shoulders of someone carrying shame that isn't theirs. You walk like someone who knows the truth, like someone who's been tested by fire and came out refined instead of destroyed, like someone who understands that being labeled dangerous by dangerous people is actually the highest compliment. And they feel it. Oh, they absolutely feel it. That shift in your energy from defensive to indifferent, from worried about their opinion to completely unconcerned with their existence. Because you've realized something they desperately needed you not to realize. You don't need them, not their approval, not their inclusion, not their validation. You don't need access to their reindeer games and performative teamwork and fake camaraderie. You need purpose and truth and people who can handle reality without creating elaborate systems to avoid it. And those people, they're starting to find you, the other ones who got labeled, the other ones who refused to bend, the other ones who looked at the emperor's new clothes and said, "He's naked, and this is ridiculous." You're building something else now, not in their system, not by their rules, not with their permission. Something that makes their little kingdom of lies look exactly as pathetic as it actually is. And that's what they truly fear. Not that you'll disrupt their system, but that you'll create a better one, and everyone will see exactly what they've been missing. Here's what they don't tell you about being labeled psychologically dangerous. It's actually the most freeing experience you can have, because once they've decided you're a threat, there's nothing left to lose. No more walking on eggshells, no more carefully curating your words to avoid triggering their fragility, no more performing normalcy to make them comfortable. The mask is off, burned, buried. You're free to be exactly who you are because they've already decided who you are. You know, and nothing you do will change that narrative. So why not lean into the truth? Why not embrace the parts of yourself they found so threatening? The clarity, the standards, the unwillingness to participate in collective delusions, the ability to see through social smokescreens and call things what they actually are. Those aren't flaws, those are superpowers. And they labeled you dangerous because people with superpowers make powerless people very, very nervous. Think about it. What exactly did you do that was so terrible? You asked questions, you set boundaries, you refused to laugh at cruelty, you called out inconsistencies. You expected people to do what they said they'd do. You treated your own values as non-negotiable. These are basic, healthy human behaviors. The fact that they're considered dangerous in your environment tells you everything you need to know about that environment. You're not the problem. You never were. You're the solution that a sick system can't tolerate. Now let's address the isolation, because I know it hurt. I know there were nights you lay awake wondering what was wrong with you, wondering why being yourself seemed to repel people, wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe you are too much, too intense, too honest, too unwilling to just go along to get along. But here's what you need to understand about that isolation. It wasn't punishment. It was filtration. Every person who fell away because of the label, they were never really with you anyway. They were with the version of you that made them comfortable. They were with the performance, not the person. The ones who stayed, the ones who looked past the warning labels and decided to judge you by your actual character instead of someone else's fear, those are your people. Rare, precious, worth more than 1,000 shallow connections based on convenient lies. The isolation burned away everything false, every fake friend who only liked you when you were useful, Every alliance based on mutual compromise of integrity, every connection maintained by pretending to be less than you are, all of it gone. And what's left is real. Smaller maybe, but real, authentic, built on truth instead of performance. That's not loss, that's refinement. You didn't lose your community, you discovered you never had one. And now you're free to build something actual. Something that doesn't require you to shrink or hide or apologize for having a backbone. Something that doesn't collapse the moment you stop pretending. Let me tell you what they're doing right now. They're watching, still, always. Not because they're worried about what you might do, because they're terrified of what you might become. They're scanning your social media, tracking your movements through shared connections, monitoring your progress through mutual acquaintances. They tell themselves it's professional awareness, staying informed, protecting the team. But really, they're checking to see if you've fallen apart yet, if the isolation broke you, if being labeled and ostracized and warned against finally convinced you that you were the problem. And every time they check, every time they hear about you through the grapevine, they're looking for evidence of your collapse, your apology, your return to compliance, your admission that they were right and you were wrong. But you're not giving them that satisfaction, are you? You're doing the opposite. You're thriving, not in spite of the label, but because of it. Because being cast out of a dysfunctional system is the first step to building a functional life. You're creating things, connecting with people who value authenticity, pursuing projects that actually matter instead of just participating in elaborate time-wasting rituals disguised as work. You're living proof that their system isn't necessary, that compliance isn't required for success, that you can be exactly who you are and not just survive, but flourish. And that's what keeps them up at night, not your supposed danger, your freedom. Here's the part that would surprise them if they knew. You understand them now, completely. You see why they did it. Why they had to label you, had to warn people, had to create this elaborate narrative about your danger. It wasn't personal, it was survival. Because people like you, people who refuse to participate in collective delusions, you're a virus in their carefully constructed reality. One honest person in a room full of liars doesn't just disrupt the lies, they reveal the lying. They make everyone else's performance visible. They force people to choose between comfort and truth. And most people, when given that choice, will choose comfort every single time. So they had to neutralize you, had to make you the problem so they didn't have to examine their own complicity, had to frame your honesty as aggression so they could frame their lies as kindness. Had to cast you out so everyone else would see what happens to people who break the rules. It was never about you being dangerous. It was about you being a mirror, and people will destroy a mirror rather than look at what it reflects. You understand this now. Not to forgive them, not to excuse them, but to be free of them. To stop carrying their judgment as if it meant something. To recognize their label for what it actually was, a confession of their own weakness, an admission that they couldn't handle reality. Desperate attempt to maintain control in a situation where they had no real power. They labeled you psychologically dangerous because psychologically you were free, and nothing terrifies imprisoned people more than someone who's found the exit. Now we're going to talk about something they desperately don't want discussed. The people they're briefing, the ones they're warning away from you, they're starting to see through it. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough. Enough to create cracks in the narrative. Enough to make people wonder, enough to turn stay away from them into what's really going on here, because humans have an instinct for authenticity. We can sense it even when we're trained to distrust it, and you have it in abundance. So when someone gets told, don't talk to them, they're dangerous, and then they accidentally end up in a conversation with you, there's a disconnect. You're not foaming at the mouth. You're not unstable. You're just direct, honest, real, in a way they haven't experienced in their professional environment, maybe ever. And that creates cognitive dissonance. The warning doesn't match the reality. The label doesn't fit the person. And smart people, people who trust their own observations over received narratives, they start questioning, what did they actually do? Becomes a question asked with genuine curiosity instead of fearful avoidance. And the answers, when they come from your accusers, are increasingly unsatisfying. They're just difficult. They don't respect authority. They challenge things that don't need to be challenged. These aren't reasons. These are complaints from people who want compliance and got confronted with consciousness instead. Some of these briefed people, they become allies, not publicly, not in ways that would risk their own standing, but quietly. They start watching what you're actually doing instead of what they're told you're doing. They start noticing patterns, how you're only difficult when you're holding people accountable, how you only don't respect authority when authority is acting without integrity, how you only challenge things when those things are obviously wrong and everyone else is pretending they're fine. You're accumulating an underground support system. People who can't openly associate with you but secretly respect everything you represent. People who watch your refusal to break and draw strength from it. People who see you surviving without the system's approval and realize maybe they don't need it either. Let's talk about the long game, because this isn't about winning today. This isn't about getting vindication tomorrow. This is about becoming someone they can't label 5 years from now. Someone whose success is so undeniable, whose impact is so measurable, whose character is so clearly solid that their warnings just sound bitter. You're building that person right now. Every day you choose integrity over convenience. Every time you maintain your standards when dropping them would be easier. Every moment you refuse to become what they accused you of being. You're creating a reputation that will eventually overwrite their label. Not by defending yourself, not by arguing against their characterization, but by living so fully in your truth that reality itself contradicts their lies. Here's what that looks like practically. You're documenting everything. Not obsessively, not paranoidly, just accurately. Keeping records of your work, your contributions, your interactions. Creating a paper trail of competence that will speak when whispers try to drown you out. You're building relationships with people outside their influence. Listen closely, because this is about to shatter everything they taught you about power and strategy and winning and war. You magnificent minimalist, you elegant destroyer, you beautiful wielder of simplicity in a world drowning in complexity. They came at you with dissertations, and you responded with a shrug. They brought algorithms, and you brought intuition. They brought nuclear weapons, and you showed up with a water pistol, and somehow you won. Let me tell you what really happened while they were getting their 3rd degree in manipulation. While they were attending seminars on advanced psychological warfare, while they were downloading every strategy book ever written, you were sitting there with a napkin and a broken pencil sketching sketch figures that would become their downfall. because your strategy was so simple, so pure, so fundamentally basic that their overcomplicated minds couldn't even process it. They kept looking for the trap, the hidden layer, the complex mathematics behind your move. But there was no trap. There was no secret formula. There was just you and the most obvious solution sitting right there in front of everyone. The solution so simple that their sophisticated minds dismissed it immediately as too elementary, too basic, too beneath their intellectual superiority. They were playing 4D chess while you were playing tic-tac-toe, and you won because they forgot that sometimes the shortest distance between 2 points is still a straight line, even when everyone else is taking scenic routes through complexity. You know what killed them. What absolutely destroyed their entire framework, their whole identity, built on being the smartest person in every room? It was watching you succeed with kindergarten logic while they failed with quantum physics. It was seeing you solve in 3 words what they couldn't solve with 300 pages. They had committees and you had common sense. They had focus groups and you had gut feeling. They had data analysis spanning decades, and you had one simple observation that cut through all their noise like a hot knife through theoretical butter. Here's what they'll never understand about that water pistol versus nuclear submarine moment. They spent billions on that submarine, years of engineering, decades of strategic planning, entire careers dedicated to making it unsinkable. And you looked at it for 30 seconds. Saw the one tiny hole they forgot to seal, and squirted water through it, not to destroy the submarine, but to prove that all their complexity had made them blind to the basics. The submarine didn't sink because of your water pistol, it sank because of their embarrassment, their complete psychological collapse when they realized a child's toy had exposed the fatal flaw in their masterpiece. They were so busy protecting against torpedoes and missiles and advanced warfare that they forgot to check if the screen door was locked. You didn't attack their strength. You ignored it completely and poked the one spot they were too sophisticated to defend. This is what they mean when they say you broke them without breaking a sweat. You didn't outthink them, you underthought them. You went so far below their radar that you were basically underground, while they were scanning the skies. They were prepared for warfare and you showed up for a water balloon fight. And somehow that asymmetry, that complete mismatch of seriousness, that's what made their entire system short-circuit. They called emergency meetings about you. Committees were formed to study your methodology. And that's where it got even better. Because the more they analyzed, the less sense it made. The more they complicated your simplicity, the further they got from understanding it. They wrote papers about your approach, created models, tried to reverse engineer your success. But how do you reverse engineer someone who just did the obvious thing that everyone else was too smart to see? Let me paint you the picture of what happened in those boardrooms, in those emergency sessions, in those panic guild conference calls. Someone stands up with a PowerPoint presentation titled Deconstructing the Anomaly and proceeds to spend 3 hours analyzing your 2-minute decision. They create charts showing the 17 different factors that might have influenced your choice. They map out the psychological profile of someone who would dare to be that simple in a complex world. Meanwhile, you're at home eating cereal straight from the box, not even thinking about them because that's the other thing that drove them insane. You didn't just beat them simply, you beat them casually. You beat them without preparation, without stress, without sleepless nights. While they were having anxiety attacks about your next move, you were taking naps. You were watching cartoons. You were living your life completely unbothered by the war they thought you were fighting. They kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the complex part of your plan to reveal itself, for the moment when you'd show your true, sophisticated strategy. but it never came, because there was nothing else. There was no phase 2, no hidden agenda, no secret mastermind reveal. Just you being exactly what you appeared to be. Someone who saw the obvious solution and took it, while everyone else was too busy being clever to be effective. You became their case study, their cautionary tale, their nightmare scenario. Not because you were dangerous in the traditional sense, but because you represented something their entire worldview couldn't accommodate. The possibility that all their education, all their training, all their sophisticated methodologies might be beaten by someone who just used common sense. Someone who looked at their Gordian knot, and instead of developing a complex untying strategy, just cut it with safety scissors. Here's what happened to their PhDs, to their advanced degrees, to their walls covered in certificates and achievements. Every credential became a weight. Every qualification became a blindfold. Every sophisticated thought pattern became a prison. They were so educated they couldn't see straight. So refined they couldn't think crude. So elevated they couldn't touch the ground, where the real solutions were growing like weeds. You expose the PhD paradox. The more they knew, the less they could see. The more theories they had, the less reality they could grasp. They were speaking in academic languages. You were speaking in human. And guess which one actually communicates? Guess which one actually moves things? Guess which one actually works in the real world, where people don't have time for your 40-page analysis of why the sky appears blue. They tried to intellectualize your anti-intellectualism. They tried to systematize your lack of system. They tried to make complex what was fundamentally simple, and every attempt made them sink deeper into their own confusion, their own inability to accept that maybe, just maybe, they had been overthinking everything their entire lives. That maybe their sophisticated suffering was just regular suffering with extra steps. You didn't insult their intelligence. That would have been too simple, too expected. No, you did something far worse. You made their intelligence irrelevant. You made all their mental gymnastics look like exactly what they were. Unnecessary complications to avoid dealing with simple truths. You turned their greatest strength into their greatest weakness, just by refusing to engage with complexity, just by staying firmly planted in the realm of the obvious. When they finally surrendered, and oh, they did surrender, it wasn't with white flags or formal declarations. It was with confused silence, with bewildered stares, with the slow recognition that they had been defeated by someone who wasn't even trying to win. The surrender documents, if they existed, would be blank pages, because how do you document losing to someone who didn't have a strategy? How do you explain being outsmarted by someone who wasn't thinking? They surrendered to simplicity itself, to the horrifying realization that their entire complex infrastructure could be toppled by someone with a clear thought and a direct action. They surrendered to the truth they'd been avoiding, that most problems don't require genius to solve. They just require someone willing to state the obvious and act on it, while everyone else is busy being sophisticated. You want to know what their surrender really looked like? It looked like them trying to hire you as a consultant. It looked like them offering you ridiculous amounts of money to teach them your method, to explain your process, to break down your system. And the beautiful irony is that you couldn't teach them even if you wanted to, because how do you teach someone to stop overthinking? How do you give a PhD in common sense? How do you systematize the absence of a system? They wanted workflows and you gave them water guns. They wanted complex strategies and you gave them stick figures. They wanted to understand, and that was exactly their problem. They were so busy trying to understand that they forgot to just see, just act, just be. You didn't defeat their strategy. You revealed that their strategy was defeating itself. that their complexity was its own worst enemy, that their sophistication was just fear dressed in fancy clothes. And what you started without meaning to wasn't just a victory, it was a revolution, a simplicity revolution, where suddenly everyone started questioning whether they really needed that consultant, whether that 40-step process could maybe be 3 steps, whether that committee might just need one person with common sense. You became the patron saint of the obvious, the champion of the uncomplicated, the proof that sometimes the emperor's new clothes are just nakedness with a marketing department. But here's where it gets interesting, where your simple victory becomes complex in its implications. Because now they're trying to become you, trying to adopt simplicity as a strategy, and that's where they're failing again. They're overcomplicating simplicity itself, creating frameworks for being simple, developing methodologies. They're treating simplicity like another tool in their complex toolbox, not understanding that simplicity isn't something you do, it's something you stop doing. In that place, you didn't adopt simplicity as a strategy, you just stopped adopting strategies. You didn't choose to be simple, you just stopped choosing to be complex. And that's the difference, that's the gap they'll never cross, because they're trying to add simplicity to their arsenal when what they need to do is throw the arsenal away. They're trying to learn simplicity when what they need to do is unlearn complexity. The water pistol wasn't a weapon, it was a demonstration. A demonstration that their nuclear submarine, their pride and joy, their ultimate expression of advanced warfare, could be defeated by someone who wasn't even trying to fight. You didn't sink their submarine. You revealed it was already sinking under the weight of its own overcomplicated existence. The water pistol was just the honest finger pointing at the Emperor's nakedness while everyone else was commenting on the fabric quality of clothes that didn't exist. Now let's talk about what you built in the ruins of their overthinking. While they were holding emergency meetings about emergency meetings, while they were forming committees to investigate the committees, while they were creating protocols for simplifying their protocols, you were already 3 moves ahead. Not because you were planning 3 moves ahead, but because you were just moving while they were still analyzing the first move. You built something they couldn't recognize, couldn't categorize, couldn't contain in their frameworks and methodologies. You built results without process, success without strategy, achievement without architecture. You built proof that their entire system was optional, that all their requirements were self-imposed, that all their complexity was just insecurity wearing a 3-piece suit. They kept asking, but what's your secret? Not understanding that the absence of a secret was the secret. They kept looking for the magic behind the mundane, not realizing that the mundane was the magic. They kept trying to find the complexity. You must be hiding somewhere, not accepting that you were exactly what you appeared to be. Someone who just did the obvious thing while they were busy debating the theoretical implications of obviously things. Your aftermath architecture was no architecture at all. It was just clear ground where their towers of complexity used to stand. It was just open space where their mazes of methodology used to confuse. It was just simple paths where their highways of hypothesis used to tangle. You didn't build something new, you just cleared away everything unnecessary, and what remained was already there, had always been there, waiting for someone simple enough to see it. They pride themselves on pattern recognition, on seeing connections others miss, on understanding complex relationships between seemingly unrelated variables. But they couldn't recognize your pattern because your pattern was the absence of patterns. Your pattern was randomness that worked, chaos that succeeded, accident that kept winning. How do you recognize a pattern that doesn't repeat? How do you study a method that doesn't exist? How do you prepare for someone who isn't preparing? Every time they thought they had you figured out, you did something that broke their model. Not because you were trying to break their model, but because you weren't aware a model existed. You were playing by the rules of reality while they were playing by the rules of their theoretical frameworks. You were solving actual problems while they were solving their solutions to problems that their previous solutions had created. They became pattern-seeking missiles locked onto a target that didn't have a heat signature. They became code breakers trying to decrypt a message that wasn't encrypted. They became archaeologists trying to uncover depth in something that was purely surface. And the more they looked for patterns, the more patterns they imagined, and the further they got from understanding that sometimes things just are what they are. Score. Your anti-packer became their obsession. They started seeing your simplicity everywhere, started attributing every simple solution to your influence, started fearing that maybe everyone around them was secret simplicity agent. They became paranoid about the obvious, terrified of the straightforward, suspicious of anything that didn't require a manual to understand. You didn't just beat them, you made them afraid of being beaten the same way again. The moment of their true surrender wasn't when they admitted defeat, it was when they admitted confusion. When they sat in their expensive chairs, in their expensive offices, with their expensive degrees on the wall, and admitted they had no idea what just happened. When they realized their entire framework for understanding success and failure didn't include a category for what you had done. They surrendered intellectually before they surrendered practically. Their minds gave up before their mouths did. They experienced the unique humiliation of being too smart to understand something simple, of being too educated to see the obvious, of being too sophisticated to grasp the basic. It was like watching someone with a PhD in marine biology drown in a puddle because they were too busy analyzing the water composition to just step out of it. The intellectual surrender was visible in their eyes. That moment when their pupils dilated not with fear, but with the recognition that everything they believed about intelligence might be wrong. That maybe being smart wasn't about knowing more, but about knowing what not to know. That maybe wisdom wasn't accumulation, but subtraction. You became their philosophical crisis, their existential question mark. You were the living proof that their entire value system might be inverted, that their hierarchy of intelligence might be upside down. You were the simple question that their complex answers couldn't address, the basic problem their advanced solutions couldn't solve. You were the mirror that showed them they had been looking at everything backwards, including mirrors. What they couldn't admit, what they still can't admit, is that they're addicted to complexity. They need their problems to be complicated, because complicated problems require complicated people to solve them. They need their solutions to be sophisticated, because sophisticated solutions justify sophisticated salaries. They need their strategies to be intricate, because intricate strategies make them feel important. You expose their addiction by being clean, by showing up without needing complexity, without craving complication, without requiring the drug of overthinking. You were the sober person at their intellectual cocktail party, and suddenly everyone realized they were slurring their thoughts. You were the clear eyes in a room full of people high on their own intelligence, and your clarity made their intoxication obvious. They tried to get you to drink their complexity Kool-Aid. They offered you positions, papers, projects, anything to get you into their system, to make you need what they needed. But you just smiled and stayed simple, stayed clear, stayed sober. And that terrified them more than any aggressive rejection would have, because it showed them that their drug of choice was optional, that their addiction was chosen, that their complexity was a crutch they could throw away if they just had the courage to walk without it. Without it, they're dead. The withdrawal symptoms were visible, the shaking hands when they tried to write a simple email, the sweating foreheads when they attempted a direct conversation, the anxiety attacks when faced with a problem that didn't require a committee. They were complexity junkies going cold turkey, and you were the intervention they never asked for but desperately needed. You created new physics, new laws of nature that their old models couldn't compute. In your physics, the shortest distance between 2 points wasn't just a straight line. It was not moving at all and letting the points come to you. In your physics, force equals mass times not giving a damn. In your physics, every action has an equal and opposite overreaction from people who overthink everything. Your physics broke their physics. Their carefully calibrated systems, their precisely measured responses, their calculated risks, all became obsolete when faced with someone who didn't calculate anything. You were quantum uncertainty in human form. You were Heisenberg's principle applied to strategy. You were Schrödinger's competitor. Both there and not there, both playing and not playing, both winning and not even, compete. They tried to measure you with their instruments, but their instruments were calibrated for complexity, and you registered as background noise. They tried to track you with their systems, but their systems were designed for patterns, and you were patternless. They tried to predict you with their models, but their models required data, and you weren't generating the kind of data they knew how to read. In your new physics meetings dissolved, when exposed to common sense committees evaporated, when heated by direct action bureaucracies collapsed when subjected to the gravity of simple solutions. You didn't rewrite the laws of physics, you just reminded everyone that physics works fine without the 40 pages of equations that academics add to make themselves feel special. They tried to get you to drink their complexity Kool-Aid. They offered you positions, papers, projects, anything to get you into their system, to make you need what they needed. But you just smiled and stayed simple, stayed clear, stayed sober. And that terrified them more than any aggressive rejection would have, because it showed them that their drug of choice was optional, that their addiction was chosen, that their complexity was a crutch they could throw away if they just had the courage to walk without it. Without it, they're dead. The withdrawal symptoms were visible, the shaking hands when they tried to write a simple email, the sweating foreheads when they attempted a direct conversation, the anxiety attacks when faced with a problem that didn't require a committee. They were complexity junkies going cold turkey, and you were the intervention they never asked for but desperately needed. You created new physics, new laws of nature that their old models couldn't compute. In your physics, the shortest distance between 2 points wasn't just a straight line. It was not moving at all and letting the points come to you. In your physics, force equals mass times not giving a damn. In your physics, every action has an equal and opposite overreaction from people who overthink everything. Your physics broke their physics. Their carefully calibrated systems, Their precisely measured responses, their calculated risks, all became obsolete when faced with someone who didn't calculate anything. You were quantum uncertainty in human form. You were Heisenberg's principle applied to